So here we have this young child who's got the drooping in the corner of the face. We see the stroke in the area of the brain that actually goes along with that. And the area of the brain that's actually being damaged to cause this lower drooping in the side of the corner of the mouth is called the posterior internal capsule. And the cross-section of the brain in this slide, and the arrows pointing to the mouth as well as down to the brain, is basically showing you exactly where the lesion is to account for this drop in the corner of the mouth, up high in the brain. Now, this was leaving me in the situation of, okay, I've got schizophrenic patients, I've got autistic children, and they all are showing similar features that suggest there's a blood clotting, blood sludging problem. This is 2001, 2002. And then when you come across literature going back at that time, like this quote here from Stella Chess, who looked at the rubella birth defect evaluation project out of New York University Medical Center in 1964. There was a large outbreak of German measles at the time, and many children were harmed who were in the first trimester of pregnancy when the mother was exposed to German measles. And Stella Chess found that there was a large increase in the number of children with autism or autism spectrum developmental disorders who were prenatally exposed to rubella. And we have found the literature shown as well similar sort of prenatal exposures are predictive of future onset of schizophrenia as well. Ironically, or curiously, back around this time, the journal for this type of information in the medical literature was the Journal of Autism and Childhood Schizophrenia. We actually separate schizophrenia from autism simply based on the clinical symptoms alone, because both diseases and disorders, we have no idea, and well, we didn't have any idea in medicine as to how they're actually being caused. Multiple roads to get to the final end problem. The problem with many of these neurological and disorders of thinking and emotions and processing of information and behavior that happens from the brain, the actual problems that you actually see clinically in terms of the symptoms, and we get clinical labels from collections of symptoms. We label the symptoms we label disorders and diseases based on collections of these symptoms, and because symptoms are different from autism, for example, than from schizophrenia on certain core features, then we consider them to be two separate illnesses, and they respond differently to different medications. But the bottom line is all of these disorders across the brain, behavior, emotion, processing information, they exist on a continuum from mild to moderate to severe. The degree and type of symptoms you have are not only a product of where in the brain this sludging process is occurring, it's also when in development it occurred, how long it lasts for, whether you were pre-exposed or pre-set up for it and it got worse with time, whether you've developed some sort of suppression to your immune system to prevent you from having an adverse reaction, and you lose that suppression. We call that loss of immune tolerance later on in life, and you end up having the damage to the microvessels to the brain. We can't see it happening in contemporary medical diagnostics. There's no tools that we have until now, and we'll show you through these videos how we can now see this in real time, and as a good example of how powerful this is, not just with the neurological stuff now we've called Brain Guard. In fact, we're going to give you most of those measures. You'll be able to see for yourself and go tell your friends and family. Go look for this. You see the eye turning in, the corner of the mouth going down, the eyelids becoming out of sync when they're blinking. You can't see it with your naked eye. Put it to a camera, slow it down, you will. And this is not there before vaccine, there afterwards. And oh, by the way, you can go and get this microscope looking at the corner of the eye, and you actually see the clotting actually happening. Wasn't there a day before vaccines, is there now. And also developing autism or at risk for sudden death. That's where we're at right now. We're beyond the speculation. It's proof causation. And you will walk away from these videos with that information in your hand and in your pocket, and please share that with the world, because the world has to stand up here and start crying bloody murder to stop this what's been going on. This slide here is a big zoomed in look here. You have to appreciate that in your body you have 600,000 miles of capillaries, and capillaries are the smallest end blood vessels, and this is a capillary here, and capillaries are so tiny that the red blood cells, which carry oxygen to the tissue and drop it off, have to bend down and squeeze and can only go through the capillaries in single file. Now keep in mind that the white blood cells are structurally bigger than the red blood cells, and that gets important later on in this video series where we'll show you why this is a problem in terms of causing the strokes and the blood sludging we're talking about. But here, as you see, the red blood cells are going through the capillary single files. 600,000 miles of capillaries in your body. In fact, 95% of the blood vessels in your body, 95%, are capillaries. The smallest, tiniest ones, microscopic, we cannot see them with anything that medical diagnostics have. You can't go to your doctor, go to the emergency department, go to the family practice unit, or go anywhere where they're going to look at you and say, oh yeah, your capillaries are blocked. We can't see it. It's silent. So we don't see it, we don't know what's going on. And worse than that, because you can have silent damages happening from this blood sludging problem right before your eyes, and you don't even know what's actually happening, but it's causing profound disease and setup for disease and brain damage here and now to your child, and possibly leading to sudden infant death. But when you know this process exists and that we are blind to it as parents, physicians, scientists, and society as a whole, it becomes a concern. And the concern now, when you recognize it's there, it's a concern that can be addressed and dealt with. Capillaries, although they represent 95% of the blood vessels in the body, they only have about 5% of the whole circulating blood at any given time. Single file stuff. Red blood cells squeeze and go through. This slide here now is basically, we're looking at we have a video of this, we'll show it to you. But what happens here is, if you're looking very carefully, this is going through the concept of viscosity. Because viscosity, or the thickness of the blood, is a function of the amount of blood cells in that area of blood at a time. And we call that the hematocrit. And hematocrit is the principal contributor to the thickness of the blood, and thickness of the blood is one of the contributors to sludging and slowing down blood flow, and to a certain extent can actually stop blood flow to some areas in the capillary networks. So this slide basically is looking at the vessels in the cremasteric muscle, in the muscle that actually is having blood flow come through it, and in one area the hematocrit's higher and the other one is not. This basically demonstrates the Farias effect, because when you have branches of blood vessels coming off, like you see here, the plasma, the fluid within which the red blood cells are actually being carried along through the blood vessels, the plasma gets skimmed off to one side, to one of the branches here, and if the red blood cells are going the other way, by and large you have an increase in hematocrit, or an increase in thickness or viscosity, all the same idea, and that area is itself, based by structural design of the branch in the blood vessel at the capillaries, more susceptible to anything else that can actually lead to increased thickness or slowing of blood flow and increased likelihood of blood sludging and lack of oxygen delivery and strokes. This slide here basically is looking at about 9 children or infants, all who died from prenatal exposure. Again, I'm just using congenital rubella or German measles as an example, but all 9 of these infants who were exposed to this infectious disease show evidence when they died in every organ, across every organ system in the body, of damage to the small blood vessels and causing clotting, ischemia, strokes, and coagulation. Every organ. This tells you one bug, every organ, lack of oxygen, stroke-like phenomena, generic problem across the board. Is this a problem just with prenatal exposure to German measles? No, it's a problem with all foreign things entering your body. Whether it's polio, paralysis, tetanus, measles, mumps, rubella, mercury, aluminum, fluoride, all of these things, even dietary substances, now that we know the mechanism is here relative to causing this problem of blood clotting, all of these things individually, collectively, or in summation can actually cause these problems that we now call autism.